Welcome to the Creek Road Baptist Pulpit. These weekly podcasts feature expository messages delivered to edify the soul. Now let's join Pastor Dave as he presents this week's message. Matthew chapter 25 will be our text this morning. We'll begin in verse 14. I'm going to read the story or the parable of the talents. So Matthew chapter 25, verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants, and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. Then he that received the 5 talents went, and traded the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh, and reckoneth with them. And so he that received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee, that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid thy talent in the earth, and lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away, even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I began last week in Matthew chapter 25 and wanted to follow this week with this parable. We began last week with 25, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto 10 virgins. And we had the 10 virgin parable last week. We talked about the 5 wise and the 5 foolish and how they were not watching. We come now to another parable about watching where watching isn't really mentioned. And we'll talk about that as we get into this particular parable. But notice how we begin. The kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. One of the reasons why I really wanted to preach this particular parable is found right here in verse 14. Look at the very last phrase here in 14. And delivered unto them his goods. I think sometimes we pass over that. Let's pretend for a second that you're traveling someplace. Or, hey, I've got a perfect illustration. My neighbor is going out of town. And she called the other day. And she said, we're going out of town. I forgot to stop the mail. Would you get our mail for us? She said, we're going to get mail, and there may be a couple of packages that come. So if you would just get the mail and hold it for us until we get back, she said, that'd be great. She'd just watch the porch for the packages and get the mail. So she gave us a responsibility over something that is precious to her, which is her mail and that package or 2 that she's going to receive while she's gone. And she said, just hold on to it until, it comes in, until we come back. And here in this parable in verse 14, the man traveling into a far country who has servants, he has goods, and he delivers those goods to his servants. Let me ask you a question. What is precious to you? What is precious to you? Okay, you got that? You know, you got that thing, or maybe it's a person, maybe it's a thing. What is precious to you? Got that in your mind's eye? Okay. Now, who do you trust to oversee that precious thing? Who do you trust? Who would you give it to? Who would you say in your life, you I can trust with this thing that's most precious to me? You got that person in your mind's eye? Or maybe that's several people. Maybe you'd have a hard time choosing. Or maybe it's just one or two. You see, the man traveling into a far country had some precious things. We just read over this, and he delivered unto them his goods, as if this was nothing more than just stuff that he gave to his servants, or money that he gave to his servants. But notice that it says, he delivered unto them his goods. They belong to the man traveling into the far country. They're his. He can't take them for some reason, so he delivers them to his servants. So the very first thing we know about the servants, before we meet any of them in this parable, is that they are trusted. Because this man has something precious, something that he values, something he can't take with him into the far country. And he delivers them to his servants. Now look at 15, because in 15 we drill down just a little bit. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. Notice the next phrase. To every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. So how did he deliver his goods? Well, he evaluated the people that he trusted. And he said, I know that John over here can handle 5 talents worth of my goods. So I'm going to give John 5, because I know John and I know what he can do. I bought John and redeemed him from the slavery pens because I knew he had these talents, or I knew he had these abilities, and I knew that they would be a perfect match in my household, and I knew that I needed those abilities. And so I'm going to take John, I'm going to give him the 5 talents worth of my goods, and I'm going to let John manage them because I trust John and I know that he can do it. He comes to Jane. He says, now Jane, she's got abilities that are different from John. So I'm going to take Jane here, and I'm going to give her 2 talents worth of my goods because I trust Jane. And I've purchased Jane because I knew she had these abilities, and they are a perfect match, and they complement what John can do. And John and Jane together will manage 7 talents of my goods. And then he looks over here at David, and he says, David, he's a great guy, but really there's only one thing he's good at. He's got one good ability. And I'm going to give David, because I trust him, that one talent of my goods for him to manage. I trust him, but he's got that one ability. He does it great, and it's a great match with Jane and John. And so together, all of them now have 8 talents worth of my property. That's as much as I can give out because I have no more. And so these people and their abilities now are going to be able to manage my talents. And a talent basically is a sum of money or property that's lumped together into a lot or a group. So it's it's just, let's say if it's money, it's 1,000 pieces of silver or gold, or it's 500 pieces of silver or gold. However, the householder divided it out between all of these servants. It is a group of his property, whether it's money, real property, or whatever it might have been. That stuff that he had, he distributed. To each one, notice verse 15, to every man according to his several ability. So, the householder knows his servants because they're his servants. He knows what they can do, and he trusts them to do what they can do with his property while he's gone. And notice verse 14, the householder leaves. Verse 15, the householder leaves. Straightway he took his journey. So he calls them in, doesn't explain why, doesn't tell us where, doesn't say when. None of that. We don't get any of those questions answered. The servants just come in. All of this has been done in the mind of the master of the house before they come in, and he delivers them the talents. He says, take care of this for me. And then he leaves. He's got his bags packed. He's got his overcoat on. He's got his tie tied. He's ready to go. They can smell the cologne on his collar. And he gives them the talents, and he walks out the door. And those three must have looked at each other and said, well, okay, then this is our job, to manage what the householder has left us. All right, look at verse 16. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. Now, did the householder tell the servant to trade and make more? Do you see that anywhere in this text? Did he tell them, do something with this? He just said, here's my property. You get 5, you get 2, you get 1. See ya. And he walks out the door, and he doesn't tell them what to do with it. But what does he do? And by the way, guess what? The 5 talents that he's been given, this first man, John, he's got the 5. He's given 5 talents. The master doesn't tell him what to do with it, but we know that the 5 talents do not belong to the servant. Who do they belong to? They belong to the master. They belong to the householder. They belong to the man who's now absent. He's gone off on a long journey, some far country, who don't know where. And so what does this servant do? How come he couldn't just walk into his house, open up his safe, his lockbox, his place to hide stuff, put the talents there, close it up, seal it up, make sure nobody knew where it was, and it would be okay? Because he's entrusted to protect this money or property or whatever it happens to be. No, you know what he wanted to do? This was in the mind of this servant. He wanted to glorify his master. And he wanted to go above and beyond the master's expectations. He wanted to show him not only that he was trustworthy, but the servant wanted to show his great love for the master. And so, what does he do? He goes and trades. And by the way, look how successful he is in this. He goes and trades with these talents, and he makes 5 other talents. Now, are the 5 other talents his or the master's? The master's, right. Because the money that he started with belonged to the master, and the money that he makes belongs to the master. This servant is not enriching himself. He's not enriching his house. He's not enriching his wife or his children. None of the property belongs to him. None of the money belongs to him. He is still just John, the master's servant. That's all he is. He's acting in, he's acting in the stead of the master, but he's still simply an agent of the master. And all that he has still belongs to the master. All that he is because of the master. His position in the house, the recognition of his abilities, the trust imputed to him by the master, and the talents given to him to hold on to, all are because of the master. And so what does this servant do? He wants to glorify his master, so he goes and trades. And what happens? Well, it must have been a good day at the market, because now he has doubled his money. He has doubled his property. And he has 5 talents now. What happens to Jane? Jane received 2, verse 16. He that received the 5 talents, verse 17. Likewise, he that received 2, he also gained other two.